One of the things that we do is we encourage reporting. What I think I brought to the network before was about actually what do we do with all that data? How do we respond to it? So at the moment we've got statistical work going on. So I've got access to police data, it gets sent to us. But what's going on at the moment is we do an annual strategic assessment, safe city assessment that includes hate crime in that. And what we get a bit more there is the who, what, why, when, where, how. So what we're experiencing, I've got a Power BI dashboard that can map hate crime across the city, so we can identify hotspots. But what we need, I feel, and what Councillor Reynard has supported and is going for the Safe City Partnership is we'll come up with a hate crime strategy. So Abdullah Sana is working on that at the moment with the focus groups, because you can go away and get all the data, but it doesn't have the feelings, it doesn't have that anecdotal, this is what happened to me, but also solutions, because people can understand those solutions. So what I'd like to do is that we wrap that up, bring it back to this group, because literally the Safe City, the data bit is just about to be launched. I think we've got a Safe City meeting on 24th of November. So we'll have that up-to-date data. So we'll have that data, we'll have the work and it's not just around race hate, it's about all the protected characteristics. But we'll have that focus group and we can wrap that up. And I've looked at Bradford has got a really good and simple hate crime strategy, and that's what I think we need. And we've done it before, so with the violence against women and girls, particularly the on-street harassment, we did that problem profile. We looked at what our data is telling us and came up with plans to respond to that. So we've got, for example, for that we've got the Friday and Saturday night peaks linked to the nighttime economy. But there was a Wednesday 3 p.m. peak. What happens at Wednesday at 3 p.m? Schools kick out. Yeah. So it's peer-on-peer offending behaviour. But we work with schools then to come up with a peer-on-peer abuse toolkit. So if we understand and unpack all the issues around that across all those protected characteristics, but race is such a key one because we see it reflected in statistics, is the number one. What are we actually dealing with? Because if we understand what we're actually dealing with, we have a far better chance of saying is CCTV the option? Is it, what exactly are we dealing with? Because we all have some far more than others, all individual experiences of reports of it, but what is actually happening, what we're being told, supplemented with that community feedback and data, and again, bringing it to this group to kick around and for influence. So I just want to give you a little bit of hope. We're looking at it in the round, but we've got good models to use that we've used previously that we can use. The problems and the potential solutions will be different and pertinent to what we find, but it's a model that works. So that's the hope going forward.
There's also the issues about the process that the police have to follow.
Yeah.
Police gather evidence, and then where it goes and who decides and whether it goes through the CPS or not is another process that takes a little while.
Yeah.
So there are all these balancing things that are going on. Yeah. But I just want to make a couple of points. For a long time, we have said that behind every statistics there's a human being somewhere, and that we need some stories really. But it has been difficult, and I understand it might be difficult bearing in mind staff issues and all this kind of thing. But stories are very good apart from just feelings, Chris, because if you have a story, what it actually does, it shows you the gaps.
Yeah.
It also shows you good practice, and it also gives you the fact that there is a person at the end of this. So that's one point, and that point is made for a long time. We have been making that point for a long time. And in terms of age, when I was at the university, there were people who had asked, because there were mainly young people there. There wasn't anybody elderly particularly there. Is how many young people do you do anything by age or whatever? So it might be quite nice to know, the age range, because it's happening in schools. Children are coming home with stories from the playground. So that age bit, it might not be I don't say that, but
it will be. It's in our work. I say it's literally just
I haven't seen Abdullah. He tried to come and see me, but I haven't.
Yeah, because there was one a couple of weeks ago, wasn't there? We did the focus group, So, but yes, to say that's where we are. But the idea is that we obviously bring it to this group for comment, but it sits with a Safe City partnership that is police, NHS, the council, a whole host of different partners to get that oversight and support to take that forward. So I just want it to sit somewhere where it has a home, it has governance over it, to make things happen with partners. So that's the plan. So I would hope we would have that ready for 1st of April, and then have a 3 to 5 year strategy. But then, as you say, it's about resourcing, it's about understanding how we do that, and as Councillor Renyon said, but we can do those things.
And who chooses the key reporting elements, so on a scale of the type it is.
But I think it's just an opportunity to bring things together and create a way forward, and I think that's positive.
But it sounds, Chris, that you have access to our system more than I do. The part of BY is where all the stats sits, basically. And I don't have access to it, even though I've been working 31 years with the police, because I'm a civilian now.
I'm not trusted to have RMS back, don't worry. So, but we get a monthly download of data from police, so we use that, and again, it's to inform all sorts of different decision making across what we do. So actually, I've got 5 redeployable CCTV cameras. So if we identify hotspots, so Thornhill at the moment's had issues with knife crime, so we'll put some CCTV alone isn't the panacea for all ills, but it helps, and it might help. So again, if we identify certain areas, I do think, and this is really anecdotal, that Ahmed might be able to say, but I think a lot of racial abuse, particularly over COVID, was around shoplifters being challenged by members of staff who then the shoplifters respond with racial abuse. And I think retail crime is really a key issue for the city now, but also the people who are working in our shops and our retail premises are taking the brunt of some of that in terms. So, but again, we need to unpack that. We need to understand there's what Chris Brown thinks actually. Is that backed up in the data? But that's what it feels like reading a lot of reports and dealing with things around that.
And pardon, you're right. There is a human being behind every statistics. And if you remember the last meeting, the inspector who was leading on hate crime for the police actually brought an example which we talked about it, talked it through it. It's just unfortunately there's been a change, and Brian Goodall, the new inspector, has only just taken over a week ago. But hopefully, and again, you did ask, I have to say, Sam and Mohammed did ask for a similar example this time as well. And the only reason it's not there is because I couldn't access it. But it will be there next time.
So I don't remember, it was a few months ago now. There were 2 women working at the hairdresser, I think it was London Road, wasn't it? That had all that.
Behind that,
and asked Abdullah to go up and visit them, because obviously it's a nasty incident to experience, and again it just created that network, and we've got their story and they're involved with the process now. So it is about that. It's that balance of everything.
But that could really inform, that incident could really inform some of the things in hate
and it's visible and shareable, because it was some of it was film, wasn't it? And that horrible experience. So I think that's what brought it home to a lot of us. Sorry, I'll be quiet now. But it was just relevant to do, and to say it's just about what can we do going forward.
What you were saying, Parvin, about people not wanting to report it or wanting to be anonymous. Is it worth that organisations, if somebody comes to us and say something, that we then go and give the statistics? That we've had 2 people come today, even though it stays anonymous and we don't give the personal details, but for the figures, sake of the statistics, we need that.
You can report it on behalf of anyone at the end of the day. But what wouldn't happen, sadly, is if you report it on behalf of somebody who's anonymous, we can't go and talk to them to find out
more details.
Because as already mentioned, I think Parvin mentioned it briefly, police work on evidence. No matter what the issue is, that's not just for hate crime. And evidence can be statements from the victim, statement from witnesses, CCTV, all sorts of things. If the evidence is not there, more often than not, there's very little, if anything, we can do. When I say we, the police, and people need to be explained that. And so, unless we talk to the victim,
you've seen that beamed into our homes, literally every hour, isn't it? With 24-hour news reporting. Have we got within the group or the consensus of the group? Do we have any feelings of direct animosity or hate crime incidents between the sort of the Jewish or Muslim community.
No,
And that's what,
no, the power, you see, we are
Yeah.
miles away from the Middle East.
Yeah.
Our, Israel has the power of the guns.
Mm.
The power the community feels we have is of prayers. We are religious people.
Yeah.
We believe in God, and we believe that our prayers and our support in our prayers and collective coming together is very important for us at this time. And that is much more of ammunition for the community. And I talk to the community all this time because these communities are bleeding. Here in Southampton, even it's happening there. So, no, there is no animosity, nobody is arguing, quarreling, the people are coming together in solidarity.
That's good. And I think that Southampton Council Face put together really good. It was just recognising suffering, wasn't it? And let's stop the suffering. And I thought that was a well worded. And I know we're not talking about statements, but that is that sentiment. I guess
Because
within the communities, we just want stuff to stop.
There is an
But
issue about
it's very
defense.
difficult.
There is an issue about, so Israel has the right to defend itself, and yes, it
Mm.
does, so do the Palestinian people.
Mm.
But cutting out water, electricity, food, bashing children and women and all that, where is the defense in that? That is humanitarian stuff. Where is the defense in that?
I think it's the news coverage, isn't it? It's just,
Oh.
it's just non-stop.
Yeah.
And you can't pick TV
It's
on
quite
that.
biased as
And it's
well.
very, very
Yes,
biased. So I think, you
yes.
know, a lot of the community members
But
just feel so.
And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That it's that
It's
effect
very
on members as well. I guess
Yeah.
it's really difficult because if you see that happening to your people, for want of a better expression, it's very difficult not to have.
Negative feelings about.
Yeah. But I guess that's, and I think that, you know, the beauty of this network is that we've got touch points across many communities and, you know, like you say, everyone's trying to recognise that it's a bigger issue than, little old Southampton, but we still try and.
To be fair, when we
Recognise.
talk to the English colleagues, they too agree with us.
Yeah.
With the hypocrisy about Ukraine and what's happening here, you can see it for themselves. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
especially that it's
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a very interesting discussion to have. Of course, like I say, I mean, we don't want it to be as much of a political discussion of what's going on. I think we're all hurt to see what's going on, especially in bombings of hospitals and of border crossings and hospitals where people are patients already and suffering already in Gaza. And so what I'd like to shift the discussion to, if it was all right with everyone, is how it affects us in Southampton, if there's anything that we can do as a network in Southampton to maybe support some of the religious centres or any of the groups that we have in Southampton and in Hampshire.
So I think it's gone out, but there was some funding streams from government that have
Mosque
been
security.
mosque security and also
We're going
for
to
the
be-
synagogue.
MCS met on
Yeah.
Sunday, yes, we're going to look at that.
Brilliant. So,
Because it's very specific to the mosques, because you know, the mosques are being attacked and people are being thing. But I want to say that every Tuesday, there's a vigil
Mhm.
outside the civic center from 5:30 to 6:30. It's only 1 hour. But on the 12th, which is coming Sunday after Remembrance service finishes at 12. But at 2 o'clock, we're meeting at Bargate, and it's a partnership between a Palestinian Solidarity Campaign Group and the Muslim Council that we are doing a demonstration march. So it will happen from Bargate all the way to the Peace Fountain. We have spoken to the police. I've sent a letter already. Just had a response, which I was telling Ahmed about. We've had a response that he wants to know details about the route and the time and the number of people. We don't know the number of people. People are going in millions to London. But I imagine that once we advertise it, it will become a regional thing.
Sure.
So I have no idea how many people will come. They're asking me how many, my voice is going, how many people are coming? I have no idea how many people are coming. We get about 60, 70, 100 people on every Tuesday, including children who also make speeches and get very upset.
Sure. Thank you for that, Parvin. I think
So you can support us because it's a peaceful. The key word I've said to the police is it's peaceful.
that's on the 12th, is it? 12th.
It's on next Sunday.
Next Sunday.
After Remembrance Service, and there's a 2-hour block, and then we'll do that at 2 o'clock because that's respecting remembrance as well.
Sure. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in that vigil, that's on the 12th, on the Sunday after Remembrance Service. Thank you to Parvin for sharing that with us. I think we'll move on to unless there's anyone who has got any more points, I think we'll move on to the next agenda item. And I'll hand it over to Zoe in just a second. And she's just going to speak about current concerns of LGBTQ plus young people. And I'll hand it over to you, Zoe.
Hi, everybody. So for those who don't know me, my name is Zoe, my pronouns are she, her, and I manage Breakout Youth, which is an LGBTQ plus organisation that supports young people in the city aged 25. And Sam and I were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago just about some of the things that are prevalent for us at the moment as themes. Obviously, this is a hate crime network, so we are doing a lot of thinking about the impact of the current rhetoric around trans rights and trans issues. So these are things that are really impacting our young people, not only from being a victim of sort of hate crime, but also seeing the news and the social media and all the things that go around that, and actually what the impact is having them on their mental well-being. The other thing we were talking about, which is not hate crime specific, but just might be an interesting point for people who might work with young people or trans young people, is where we are seeing a rise in things like young people disclosing that they are looking online for buying hormones, so estrogen and testosterone, because the Tavistock Centre is closing, should be closing in April next year after the CAS report, and any sort of trans or gender identity stuff for young people should be done more locally. Nobody knows what the plans are. So one of the impacts this is having on young people is they are already having to do really long wait lists, but because they're desperate for being themselves, let's say, what they're doing is they're turning to the internet to look at how to buy hormones online. Estrogen is not a regulated drug in the same way testosterone is. But the other thing about buying hormones straight offline is there is a whole package that goes around to people when you have hormones. You have your blood test done, all those kind of things. And there is a medical professional. By buying hormones online, actually, you're missing out that whole tranche of things, which actually is medically unsafe. But also, you don't know when you're buying something online, you're actually getting what you're buying. So there is something about quality. And actually getting good stuff. But the other thing is, some of my young people are talking about is actually DIY hormones. And there are implications around safety around there because people will be using self-injecting. So then you have to think about safe needle exchange, clean needles, that kind of stuff. So it's just like Sam and I were talking about, just thinking if you're working with young people or trans people or young trans people, is that this is something that's becoming more prevalent for us as a group, as a theme. So really having to think about that harm reduction. But also just thinking about what the current rhetoric around trans rights, trans issues, gender are having on not only young trans people, but trans people across the board. So Sam just said, could I just say a few words about it? So does that make any sense? Has anybody got any questions that I may or may not be able to answer? If I can't answer, I will find out and let you know.
So it's Chris. I guess in
Hi, Chris.
terms of sort of the medical risk, I mean, I work very closely with the public health team in Southampton City Council. So in terms of that, what you're saying that basically any sort of treatment, hormones or the service, is potentially disappeared into the ether, and do you know where that sits locally within Southampton? So is there does like one agency, does it sit with like UHS, for example? Does it sit with Southern Health or?
I don't know the answer to that because no one seems to know. This is something that I've got some of the team sort of researching what other organisations around the country are doing or know. Is the whole thing about the CAS report is like central places like Tavistock were closing and they were going to make it more local, which actually in some ways is better for young people because you don't have to travel to places that are miles away. But there doesn't seem to be any information about where that is going to sit. And I don't know where I would find that information out, Chris. But I will make a note to see if my team has come up with any information about it when I find a bit of paper. I'm
Well,
disorganized today, so bear with me. My admin person, give me some paper.
what I'll do so is, because there's that sort of health risk of, like you say, of that self-service, that self-treatment.
Yeah.
I'll speak to public health colleagues and see if I'll find out anything and just come back to you direct.
That would be amazing. Shall I put my email in the chat? Would that be helpful to you, Chris?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, it'll be on the invite, I'm
Perfect.
sure. Yeah.
Anything you can give, because for us, trying to find out information it just proves very challenging because no one seems to know. Young people are getting letters. So I've got a young person, for example, who's almost 18. They've had a letter from Tavistock basically saying, we're closing you now have to go onto the adult waiting list. But back to the very almost beginning, which is years of waiting.
Yeah.
And the mental impact on people who are not in the bodies with the gender identify is devastating. And LGBT plus, particularly trans people, have got a higher rate of suicide ideation, suicide completion. So there is a real link from a mental health perspective. So anything you can do, Chris, would be amazing. What's your last name, Chris? Remind me. Brown. Cool. I'll put my email in. That'd be really, really useful. Any contacts you have, I'd love.
If we get any clarity, it'd be a step forward, won't it? So
absolutely. Any information is information, isn't it?
So this has always been a problem, isn't it, for young people, and access to primary care services, access to secondary services, and the needs, and in fact also to psychiatry. So how do you think things can, because Chrysalis seems to have disappeared. I met them at the university recently. They're coming out under a different name. How are you
Beyond Reflections.
Yes, that's right. So how are you working with all of them to kind of put pressure on? Because this is going to create a real issue for...
It absolutely is. There's two things I'm going to say in terms of that. Number one is we have not worked with Chrysalis about putting on pressure. We are a tiny, tiny team, and we cover the whole of Hampshire, Southampton, the Isle of Wight, and we are the equivalent of 7 full-time youth workers, and we support 500 young people a year. So our capacity for that pressure is really, really limited. But also, we're not a political organisation. So for us, because it's such a nuanced field, we are focusing our resource in supporting young people and don't really have the capacity to think about the sort of that pressure thing. I would love to be able to do that if it fits within our sort of neutrality of politicalness. And the other thing to think about, to pick up on your point about access to healthcare, there is statistical evidence that LGBTQ plus people have poorer outcomes than a cisgender, so a gender you identify as a sexual assigned at birth, or heterosexual people. And that's in accessing, but also the outcomes afterwards. So we've done some training for sort of CAMs, for example. We've been asking young people, what do you want CAMs to know? And it's really simple things like thinking about the right pronouns, not dead naming, some really, really simple things that would just make young people and trans people, because it's not just young people, feel more comfortable to access these services. But the minute they kind of get dead named or misgendered or mispronounced, actually they're like, why am I here? Because no one's listening to what I'm saying. And if you can't get that, then you're not listening to my other issues. So it's a real difficult thing. So we tend to work with individual young people to try and get them to access healthcare and support them and maybe go to appointments and stuff like that. But being a really small team, it's really hard to be able to do everything. So it's almost like we have to do what we can.
It's an issue, isn't it? We can always access services, for example, but it's how you the knowledge to be able to use it effectively. And along that that journey is the attitude of the professionals. Yeah. Which is an issue. So do you work with GPs and things like that or train them?
We do, and we do LGBT awareness training. Some places we charge for, some places we don't. So for example, if it was somewhere that we think would be a real benefit for young people to have some up-to-date information about genders and pronouns, that kind of thing, we would go and do that training for free. Because actually we know not just only trans young people, LGBT young people would benefit, but actually the wider community of the over 25s. So we do go and do that kind of thing. But again, it comes down to staffing and capacity, doesn't it? We've only got so much capacity to do these things. So we're trying to squeeze everything in as much as possible. And the issue with that is you end up doing nothing brilliantly and everything poorly, don't you? So yes, one of the things that's on our radar is to actually think about how we can increase our capacity around the LGBT awareness training and actually get those messages out more and wider. But we'll have conversations with anybody. So if you know of anybody you think might benefit from it, please feel free. I'll stick my email in a second. I can't type and talk, it turns out. Yeah, feel free to send people in our direction.
Thank you, Zoe.
Sure.
Thank you.
Matthew would just like to speak.
Yeah, it sounds a bit concerning that people are feeling pushed into buying potentially not substandard drugs and not getting the support they need alongside that. Even more importantly, I think if there's anything you feel that we can do or I can do in terms of raising awareness of that, please do get in touch. If there's something we can do through trading standards, I don't know if that's an approach we can take. I'd love to be able to help and engage with that in any way you feel is appropriate.
That'd be wonderful. If you could see your email in the chat, Matt, that would be amazing. There's more that we can raise awareness, because young people are going to do what young people do when they're desperate. So for us, we cannot give medical advice because we're not clinicians, we're not medical practitioners. And I don't want to be in a position where someone says, you've given advice, and we're like, oh no. So we have to come in from a harm reduction perspective, which is a very different kind of nuance. Yeah, so if you could see your email, Matt, that'd be wonderful. And I'll follow up with you. Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Zoe, if you wanted to perhaps leave your email address in the chat, or I can send it to Chris, forward it to you if you need it after the meeting. I think I've got your email address already, actually.
Yeah, now I'm not talking, I can type. So I just can't do both things at once. I tell people I can multitask. I absolutely cannot.
Right, so thank you for that. That's very informative. Has anyone got any more questions for Zoe, or that's about it? Yeah, sure. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. I think this is for Joanna, who'd I'll hand it over to, and that's about domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. I think Joanna, if you'd like to start the discussion about this.
Okay, so just to introduce myself and my role within Southampton Council. So I've been working for Southampton Council for about 5 years, and most of that time has been supporting victims of high-risk domestic abuse. But in the beginning of April, Council recognised that given the changes that have happened worldwide, but within Southampton, through the pandemic, through lockdowns, around domestic abuse, and they wanted to look at what was happening in terms of domestic abuse training, what was already available, and to make sure that people knew what was already available. Of course, within the voluntary sector and commission services, there's all sorts of specialist training around domestic abuse and barriers for individuals and groups and communities. But they also wanted me to deliver training and to make sure that as I analysed and came across gaps, training needs, that I was also helping to fill some of those gaps. So I've come into this temporary position within the council where I'm doing domestic abuse training, not just for council employees, but also within the voluntary sector and wider around Southampton. So this includes volunteers for within voluntary organisations, and more wider than just for council employees. So I know that Sam sent an email around to the network with information about domestic abuse training, about some of the possibilities and options, which I hope you've all been able to see, and that might answer some of your questions. But also he wanted to give me this opportunity to introduce myself to the network, because part of my role is looking at barriers to individuals accessing support and help around domestic. I think that there is some awareness of some of the barriers. There has been some funding put in through the commission services to try and address some of the barriers for individuals impacted by domestic abuse, barriers around disability, barriers for the LGBTQ+ community, barriers for individuals within Black and minoritized ethnicities. But of course, more work to identify and address barriers is definitely needed. And so anyone who would like to talk to me and give their perspective on some of the barriers for domestic abuse victims and for individuals impacted by domestic abuse, to speaking about that situation, to accessing help and support, then that will be part of my role as well within the council. I will put my email address in the chat, but if anyone has any questions about this or anything they wanted to say, then please feel free.
Can I just say a thank you for the work that you guys are doing, if that's okay? This is a really an issue again I feel very passionate about, and I think the strategy that we've put in place as a city now, I feel, is a strategy that's beginning to work and have an impact, and we would hope to see an increase, actually, I think, in terms of numbers of reporting, because I think that's an important marker to actually help us measure against, because I think, again, this is something that is hidden and underreported, much like other hate crime. Yeah, thank you for all that's going on in that space. And I think we're starting to go in the right direction there, and hopefully we start to see more women come forward, particularly women, because that, we know this is the end of time. But thank you, Pamela.
Thank you. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with my sound. I can't hear at all.
I'm not sure if anyone's speaking. Is anybody?
Yeah. I can see that somebody's gesturing, but I can't hear anything.
Oh, I think Spectrum will mute.
I think Spectrum.
I
So
was thinking
I could see somebody gesturing, and I thought I want to hear what this is, because somebody was obviously speaking, and I couldn't hear it at all. So
you weren't on your own.
I was saying, how are the statistics changing? Because forever they haven't changed. And the other thing is accessing for women and girls is perhaps not difficult in that sense. There are barriers, of course, and I understand that. Is that once they access, then what? What are their lives going to be like? And this is a question I've asked for many, many years around, well, what happens to their lives afterwards? Yeah?
Yeah.
So, disenfranchised from their families, relationships broken, problems, they can't go always back into the community, some can. So what is the future for those? And how do you look at the good outcomes, win-win situation for those families?
yes, and it's incredibly complicated. So if you have a woman who's being verbally abused by her mother-in-law who lives in her home, then that living situation is probably not going to change. It's whether support and help for that woman can be put in place to help her in that situation. And so you're not talking about changing the living situation. You're talking about putting help and support in that's appropriate and helpful for that woman in that situation, in that long-term abuse. And when you're talking about parent to child or child to parent abuse, you're not talking about necessarily those relationships ending. It's not. And when you're talking about marriage relationships, then some people may want support to stay in their marriage, but to be safer in that situation. And so it does get very complicated. There aren't answers where it's always the case that this is the right thing.
And there is a view about children being taken away, women being taken away and put in refuge and all this kind of thing. So what is your PR machine? What is your PR machine to actually say to those people, well, feel comfortable, we are not here to do that? Because that is the view out there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It really is that if you speak about what's happening, your children will be taken away from you, is a fear in all sorts of communities. And that is a very genuine fear that people have. And individual, non-judgmental and specific support for people in the situation they are in is really important. And to address some of those fears, which may be very real and very genuine fears. I would love to, if anyone would like to set up a meeting, we can do that online or we can do that in person. If someone would like to set up a meeting with me and have that more in-depth conversation, it will be really, really helpful for me in the work that I'm doing.
I would like to do that. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and Sam and the network, they also have my email address.
Oh yeah, Joanna, if you just shared your email to the network, and after this I'll send it to Parvin and Azia and someone. I'll send it to you as well if you're interested.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'm not sure if anyone else has got anything to say on this. I know we've got a few people who know about this topic more than me. So does anyone else have any more questions or anything to share?
I've got to declare an interest because Joe works for me. So, but I think the effect of trauma, the effect of domestic abuse, we need to be better at within the City Council to recognise in our processes in housing and social care. And that's exactly what Joanna's doing at the moment. She's being very modest, but she's got a huge experience. So was it Greece you worked in, Joanna,
Yes.
supporting women who've been trafficked? So she's got background and experience that it's very difficult in 5 minutes on a Zoom meeting to get across. But for me, she's a real asset for us. So I'll catch up with her and we'll get more. I know you hate Zoom meetings, don't you? But
It might be worth just.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Joanna will be really useful for that. So, but if we can plug in any organisations to increase that training, so we're looking at professionals, but like she says, we're looking at voluntary and community groups. Can we assist that? And also, this feedback is telling us what the issues are. So,
Sorry, I missed that question.
Work, training, awareness, and support. Just wondering why that is.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
Can you hear me? Okay, Joe.
Yeah, I can hear you. I just can't hear the woman across the room.
No, it was about the point that Parvin made about the statistics aren't decreasing for levels of domestic abuse and violence.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, we had thought that it was something that happened during the pandemic and that there might be a decrease. There really doesn't seem to be a decrease, and it the need for support and help doesn't seem to be decreasing at all. And so council is trying to address that both through commissioning and through in-house services. But one of the things that I've been surprised at is that how many organizations and agencies and part of the voluntary sector don't know that the training that's available through the council, which is free training, is also available more widely. So I've spoken to voluntary organizations where I've said, well, there's multi-agency training, please sign up. And then when they've said, what's the cost? I've said, well, there isn't a cost. The council is covering the cost of this. Please sign up. And I think some of this awareness is not around the city. And that's part of what I'm trying to do is say the council is providing this free resource for voluntary sector, for agencies, for organisations around Southampton. And I think people aren't really aware that that resource is there, and therefore they're not making the most of that resource.
I think if it came under the banner of safeguarding, it would be much more acceptable to many people.
Absolutely.
Safeguarding rather than domestic abuse, and because that has got a violent ring around it, and people shy away from that. I think that is really very important to think about. And the thing is, the perception. How are you going to change the perception?
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm going to be doing in the new year is I'm going to be doing training for the church, for the wider church network, for their safeguarding leads, So saying that domestic abuse is part of wider safeguarding, and so coming at it from the perspective of this is part of our role in safeguarding is one of the things that I'm going to be doing for the churches. And of course, that is something that might be helpful, you know, around the wider faith networks around the city.
Just one more thing for me, sorry, if that's okay. It's just it's trying to change the narrative from supporting victims and survivors to trying to deal with perpetrators and change perpetrators' behaviours, because we know that perpetrators like to have multiple victims. So we've got male engagement workers at Southampton City Council that are around that, but the problem is just huge, isn't it? And then we've got all the things that are going on in the online world in terms of misogynistic behaviours, the Andrew Tates of this world influencing our young people. The world of TikTok that I see affecting young people and the influences on them, it's a huge issue, because you can't, in the nicest possible way, can't fight TikTok. You can just chip away at things, and the influence of social media on our young people. I mean, the yellow door must see it all the time. Yeah,
Chris, that's right. One worker in the city for male. Things. We've said this for years, because I know within minority communities, it is not easy to leave your husband and go away. Yeah, we want to live with our husbands. We want to lead respectful lives, because respect and honor is really important for us.
Yeah.
However way you look at it. And it's also important in the white community, but it is not recognized. Let me say this to you. But the thing is, we need to make sure that we have programs for men, and I've said this for God knows how many years, that you can't dismiss one party. Where there's a conflict, you have to come together with two people who are in conflict to bring them together. Not say, all right, now go to the refuge, your children are in danger. Yeah, there are times of that, and I understand that. But a lot of times we need to do some very preventive work to actually help communities to feel confident, not only to seek advice and help and all that, but to also have the trust and confidence to think, yeah, they're not going to take my women away. They're not going to take I have a problem, but if I say anything, this is what is going to happen. So, that confidence is really important out in the, and that's in all communities, even white community.
Absolutely. And addressing the problem when you don't want it to get really, really bad to the point where people are fleeing for their safety, the police are involved, and you're talking about criminal cases. What you would hope for is intervention and help and support for everybody before it gets really bad. And that's I absolutely agree with you. That's really key.
And the tough thing that this honor badge is only put on the minorities. There is an honor badge. I have heard, and through my career, and I know in probation when there has been training and all that, the young men are saying, well, I bashed her because she was wearing too short a skirt and having a conversation in the park with it. It is a question of my respect and my honor. So there is an honor issue that is not recognized within the white community.
Absolutely.
And it needs to be sorted. So,
absolutely. I killed her because she disrespected me is not something that's only in one community.
Why are we not saying it openly instead of saying, oh, well, honor-based violence is only these minorities?
Yeah.
Acknowledge it for the whole population, because that is of more benefit than just labeling communities.
And let's not forget the male victims as well. There are male victims of domestic abuse and domestic abuse and so on as well, that, aren't confident enough to come forward and say that they're being victimised and targeted.
I have to say, working with clients, a lot of them support, and they do get to the perpetrator. Unfortunately, the system fails them afterwards, after they leave. Lack of housing, lack of support. There's so much work that needs to be done, and more money that needs to be put into this. So these women do finally try and leave the violence, but they need a better life. But unfortunately, they don't.
All the years I've worked for this, not much has changed, or in fact, very little has changed, or nothing perhaps has changed. So, what confidence do we have in that these programs are going to change anything?
Yeah.
The same
I've
same old strategy. But
Yeah.
we want to help you to make things better.
that'd be great. Thank
So, sorry, I'm gonna have to shoot you, but one thing just picking up on the point, there's the safe accommodation strategy that's being enacted mainly through new burdens that Caroline Bate, who works with me also, is leading on. And again, the possibility is the council sits on lots of property. Can we make some of those available to women who need safe accommodation? So that's the purpose of that. So again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to shoot to an award ceremony, not for me, I guess.
We've heard about that.
Yeah, but all I can say is it's happening with those discussions, because it sits with me at the moment.
Yeah.
Those discussions are real, happening, and we've got funding to do
I
that. So
trust you.
that's all we can do. But I'm not sure any of us have got a magic wand to solve
No, we don't have magic wands.
this behaviour. What we can do is try and work together though and improve things for our people. Sorry, Mohammed, I'm
No, thank you very much,
anyway.
Chris.
Item 10 is covered already, by the way,
Thank you
so at
very
least
much.
that
Covered
reduces your agenda down a little bit.
Thanks so much, Chris, for being here anyway.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you.
I've put the email address in the chat as well, but I will email it through so that it goes around to the network. Thank you.
Sure, that's fine. If I get a minute, I'll just add in Pavin's and Azi's email to the chat as well, just if you need it. Sure. With that, sorry.
I'll wait to hear from you,
Bournemouth
Chris.
University has been commissioned to evaluate our service at Yellow Door. There is a survey going around about domestic violence, so if I could send it to you and
Of course.
send it to everybody who's been here today to complete the survey, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. What's the survey on exactly? Sorry.
It's about domestic abuse.
Okay. So is it anyone who can?
Everyone can complete the survey, even if they've not been involved in domestic abuse or violence, so.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sure.
Is that okay if I can send that to you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. If you send me that, and I'll send out that survey to everyone who's in attendance. I'll send it to the rest of the network as well.
Thank you.
Can I just make a point? We've always said that this is again, it falls under hate crime to a certain degree. But you know, they changed. It used to be called domestic violence, which was very clear because it is violence.
Yeah, of course.
Abuse kind of makes it, dilutes it. 2 or 3 slaps around your face, and that's abuse. But if you talk about violence, let's talk about violence, because it is violence. Those women do get bashed about. So terminology is really important. Let's not give it an airy-fairy thing about abuse. Abuse can be anything, like I said, a stick around your foot.
I think the thing is, when we say, sorry, I was going to say domestic violence, when we say it's domestic violence, we're just focusing on the physical aspect, but there are so many different aspects.
No, you're
of
not
domestic
on the
abuse.
physical aspect. It's mental violence, it's emotional violence, spiritual violence. It all comes under that banner. Abuse is just a light term to say, well, I'll give you 3 slaps around your face. That's abuse. When he's bashing my head in and not giving me money and, emotionally harassing me every single day, is violence.
It is, but I think because there are a lot more like verbal, psychological, social aspect to domestic abuse and so on, that's why perhaps using the word violence doesn't always cover all the other different aspects that people.
I choose to disagree with you, okay?
Sure.
Sorry, Joanna.
That's fine. Joanna, did you have anything else to add, or did anyone else have any questions for Joanna?
No, thank you. Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, and I'd be very interested to meet with you and have further conversation about this.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think there's good conversation.
I would want to help you to move forward.
Thank you.
Sure. We'll just move on to the next item then. We're almost at the end at the moment, actually. The next item is actually, network run hate crime awareness event. What that is referring to is, I know Spectrum and the hate crime network, we're looking at running a larger scale hate crime awareness event next year. Something which gets the community more involved than what we usually do. Usually we have awareness sessions and network meetings, but there's not a huge turnout from the public. So we're looking at one which is more publicly focused, a hate crime awareness event. We're looking at collaborating with different organizations and perhaps universities and schools in the area. And we just wanted to know the thoughts of everyone here on how we can use this event for the benefit of the hate crime network, and how we can use it to achieve what we want to achieve as a network. And if anyone else has any more ideas on what we can have there and who we can collaborate with and so on, any kind of ideas that you've got relating to this, if you'd like to share it, we're more than interested to hear it now.
Collaboration with universities and colleges,
Yeah, sure.
education system,
Voluntary
faith
sector.
groups, voluntary organizations can collaborate with them.
And health services.
NHS, yeah, all institutional.
Definitely have
Even the
all companies
police.
come together and like run
I don't
workshops.
always know.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I think what helps is we have a lot of members and we have a lot of organizations who are with us anyway, so we can get some of them on board. Has anyone else got any more ideas about this event and or any thoughts about this?
I guess in terms of people participating, if you think about police,
Sure.
the police have link officers. So what used to be called the LAGLOs, lesbian gay liaison officers. I know there's some specific for each area. So I guess if we think about the increase of hate